a very dire state. And being a bioscientist at that time was nearly a death sentence. So can you speak to Baghdad at that time and why evidently it became so critical for you to have to find Thamer within like a time period?
Sure. So when he was released from prison, there were rumors that he heard that scientists were being assassinated. But there were a lot of rumors in prison, so what was true, what wasn't true. But when he got out, he got more information on it. And literally there was an attempt at pretty much wiping out all of the scientists within Iraq. And the reason that the jihadis employed that strategy is, well, they knew that militarily they couldn't match us. So they employed a campaign to wipe out all the brain power within the country. If you don't want a new government to be successful, one way is to wipe out their brain power. And they actually made an attempt at assassinating. They did assassinate hundreds of Iraqi academics. And if you had a particular skill that they could use, like you were a bomb maker, a conventional bomb maker, or a WMD person or whatever, they may want to keep you alive and force you to work for them against the coalition forces. Everybody else, they just did their best to annihilate them. So when Thamer got out of prison, this was the environment that he was in. So he had an X marked on his back. So not only, was he trying to build his life back, and of course, and this was around the end of 2005 when he was released from prison. But that 2006 turned out to be one of the worst years of the war. So they're facing this war. He's facing this this target by the jihadis because of his skills. So he was in a tough position at that time, and that's what caused him to go underground and try to escape from Iraq.
And he was also worried about just being in prison by the U.S. security, because for many, jihadis and different groups around, gangs all around Iraq, they looked at any type of communication with Americans as you're working with the Americans a lot of times, correct? So
that's right. That's right. So it wasn't uncommon to get stopped by any of these warring gangs, and they would grab your cell phone. If you had a connection to the Americans on your phone, instant death right there. So that was a tough thing. So there was a lot of, the Shias were fighting the Sunnis. We had outside influences, so there was a lot of warring gangs going on. Everybody's fighting for control. So it was a pretty tough situation to be released. But that's where he found himself having to, survive and find a way out for him and his family.
And evidently that led him to taking a trip to Syria to try and escape via that way. So I guess, can you speak to that moment as well? Obviously in the book, it's highlighted at a very intense level, which I love. And like I said, it was one of those moments where you have to read the rest because you can't put it down because you need to know what's going on here.
Yeah.
But can you highlight why he went to Syria and then evidently why he had to come back to Iraq?
Sure. So he wanted to obviously get out of the country because the situation was just, dire for him and his family. So, he just couldn't get out, through the American process. That just wasn't going to happen. So his thought was, I can cross the border in Syria, I can go to a foreign embassy, and I can ask, to be treated as, for asylum. And hopefully my work as a scientist will be of benefit to them, and they can help me to get to another country. So that was his plan. So they basically, him and his wife, left one day to head to Syria to try to get out that way. So they had to make that trek to the border, which was very dangerous because, again, you don't know who you're running into. And you also have to remember, too, that there was a lot of kidnappings that went on. And, some for revenge, some for political reasons, but, a lot of them were for money. So anybody was subject to being kidnapped. So that was a big concern. So they got a hold of somebody that could take them to that 5-hour trek across Iraq to the Syrian border to try to get out that way. And they had to do some bribery to get across the border, but they were eventually able to get to Syria, and they went to Damascus. And for the next 11 months, they worked every day to try to hit all these different embassies that might give them a path to freedom and to get away from, what was happening in Iraq. But unfortunately, that just did not occur. There were so many refugees fleeing that they just could not do anything for him, and it forced him to have to go back to Iraq because he still had his family and his sons back in Iraq.
Yeah, one of the craziest moments about that trip was the fact that it almost became a business for people in a war-torn country. They were working, their driver working with the guards, the military guards at the border, basically working money to be able to let people cross. And I know one time he's looking back, watching the group, and they all just start bursting out laughing. And that's, when he realized it. I mean, it's moments like that that just blow your mind, because you realize that there's a war going on. There's people's life legitimately on the line, and people are making a business out of it. And,
Sure. Well, that always happens. People are going to take advantage of other people's misery, and that goes on. I mean, we have that even when we have our own natural disasters in this country.
Yeah.
And, the price of everything gets spiked up, and so, yeah, that goes on. People are just trying to survive. They're trying to get money any way they can and just make the best of this, horrible situation, because, again, you just don't know what's going to happen, where it's going to lead, what tomorrow's going to bring. Of course, one of the things they were concerned about in Iraq is food and clean water, and the hospitals were overwhelmed. So, yeah, they had a lot, on their minds. So, but getting back to the issue of, those types of things where people take advantage and spring up and make money.
It's always a tough situation. But now we're back in Washington, D.C., and you get one of the weirdest cases after we were talking about the top, working in Booz Allen, doing the interview. They're not really giving you a lot of information, which after years in the Secret Service, you're somewhat comfortable with, but at the same time not comfortable with, because you usually get a little bit of something, but they're giving you really nothing here. And then all of a sudden you find out you have to go find an Iraqi bioscientist who has been missing, kind of off the radar, has become a ghost in his own country. And there seems to be a little bit of push from the top. So can you speak to that moment when you first got the case, the feeling, and how your perspective was on, oh shit, this is what I got to do?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to describe it, Reed, is oh shit moment. But again, when I took the job, I really did not know what they wanted me to do. That's the truth. And I figured I might have been a classified program. So I was there for a couple of weeks just getting my bag.
When I was young